You are about to witness a documentary chronicle. Every word comes from archives. Every event is authentic. No ideology, only history. Imagine a weapon so precise and versatile that it turned ordinary soldiers into specialists. The MG-34 was not designed for the masses. It was engineered as the first truly universal machine gun and became a symbol of elite units, not frontline crowds. How did a brilliant concept become a rare privilege? German doctrine built its infantry squads around the machine gun. 10 men moved and fought to protect one weapon. The gunner, assistant, ammunition carriers and spotter worked in rhythm, supporting a single barrel that dominated the battlefield. The MG-34 was the heart of this system. It could fire from a bipod during an assault, sit on a tripod in defence, bolt onto a tank hull, or pivot on a U-boat tower. No other nation entered the war with such a flexible weapon. Anyone who gripped its pistol grip felt he was holding the product of a higher craft. Inside the factories, the MG-34 was born as an engineering masterpiece. Skilled workers shaped high-grade steel, hand-polished components, and chased micrometer tolerances. The smell of cutting oil and the grind of lathes filled the air. Each gun consumed close to 150 man-hours and 49 kilograms of raw metal. Its price reached 327 Reichsmarks. In the middle of a total war that was an extravagant investment. Yet the German army believed that precision would bring victory. Quality meant accuracy and reliability. The MG-34 was not just a gun, it was a promise of superiority. On the early battlefields of 1939 and 1940, the MG-34 justified its cost. From Poland to France, the sharp crack of its shots covered advances and broke counterattacks. On its bipod, a single gunner could lay down controlled bursts, changing barrels and belts with practiced hands. On its heavy tripod, it became a stable platform able to reach out across fields and rivers. Tank crews prized the MG-34 for its compact receiver and the ability to swap barrels inside cramped turrets. Sailors and submariners mounted it as a light anti-aircraft defence. Paratroopers and mountain troops carried the lighter version into airborne and alpine assaults. The rhythm of its fire was precise. American and British soldiers said it sounded like a sewing machine compared to the later roar of the MG-42. But its very excellence soon became its curse. As fronts expanded and losses mounted, the Wehrmacht needed tens of thousands of machine guns. In 1937, the Weapons Office saw that production lines were overwhelmed. MG-34s were too complex and too costly to build in the numbers demanded by war. A new design had to be simpler. The answer arrived as the MG-42. Built from stamped and pressed parts using 27.5 kilograms of steel and around 75 man-hours, the new gun cost about 250 Reichsmarks. It fired nearly 1,200 rounds per minute. It was brutal and effective. The MG-42 flooded the infantry companies and turned into the sound of the German front. Yet even as the MG-42 became the soldier's workhorse, MG-34s kept rolling off assembly lines. Why? Because the elegant MG-34 remained indispensable in places where the MG-42 was ill-suited. Tank turrets and armoured hulls had mounts designed for the older gun. The MG-42's side-mounted barrel change did not work inside cramped vehicles. Panzer commanders on the Eastern Front often complained that the new gun jammed in mud and snow. The MG-34, when cared for, was more accurate and easier to control. That is why armoured crews, naval gunners, paratroopers and elite mountain units held onto their MG-34s. To them, the MG-34 was an instrument, not a tool. It demanded discipline, but it rewarded skill. Production numbers tell a story of rarity and persistence. In 1942, factories made about 77,000 MG-34s. In 1943, more than 160,000. And in 1944, almost 280,000. Even in 1945, tens of thousands left the assembly lines. Meanwhile, the MG-42 exceeded 400,000 units. The cost difference was stark. With its tripod, an MG-34 cost roughly 400 Reichsmarks. Ordinary riflemen could never expect such a weapon. To equip an elite battalion with MG-34s was a deliberate choice. It meant fewer guns, but greater confidence in each. Operating an MG-34 required a trained team. The gunner fired and changed barrels every few hundred rounds. The assistant fed the belt, cleared jams, and passed fresh barrels. Ammunition carriers lugged metal drums and spare parts. The group timed its bursts to conserve barrels and avoid overheating. They knew the smell of hot metal and burning oil. They felt the weight of the long receiver across their shoulders. They learned to keep dirt out of the mechanism and to keep moving between firing positions. Mastering the MG-34 was more like mastering a craft than simply pulling a trigger. That sense of craft fostered camaraderie and pride. On the front lines, the psychological impact of the MG-34 was real. Allied troops learned to assault during barrel changes. German gunners countered by practicing rapid swaps, swinging the receiver to the side and dropping in a fresh barrel in seconds. They fired short, precise bursts rather than emptying belts. Training manuals recommended 15 bursts per minute. The weapon invited restraint and precision. In that restraint lay its difference from the MG-42. One soldier later recalled that shooting the MG-34 felt like playing a violin compared to hammering a drum. That comparison speaks to why veterans loved the older gun. As MG-42s poured into infantry units, MG-34s migrated to armoured divisions and naval bases. They defended Atlantic wall bunkers and panzer formations from low-flying aircraft. U-boats carried pairs of MG-34s for surface defence. On mountains and in cities, elite units used them for controlled fire. Their presence signified trust. When a parachute infantry company received MG-34s, its men knew they had been given a premium tool. They bore the responsibility that came with it. After 1945, the MG-34's journey did not end. Captured guns travelled far beyond Europe. The Soviet Union sent them to Chinese nationalist and communist forces. France used them in Indochina. Many found their way to North Africa and the Middle East in the 1950s and 1960s. In Algeria and other colonial wars, MG-34s fought on arid plains and in dense jungles. That longevity sprang from its solid construction and availability of spare barrels. It served not just Germans, but soldiers of many flags. A weapon crafted for elites became, paradoxically, a global traveller. The MG-34 also left a deep imprint on firearms design. Its concept of a universal machine gun inspired American engineers who later created the M60, Belgians who developed the FN MAG, and Soviets who produced the PKM. Even the post-war German MG3, chambered for NATO rounds, carries the lineage of the MG-34 via the MG-42. The world adopted the principle that one machine gun could fill multiple roles. Without the MG-34, this principle might have emerged much later. Every modern general-purpose machine gun owes a debt to the gun that first attempted to be universal. For elite German soldiers, the MG-34 was more than a weapon. It was a test of discipline and cooperation. Fallschirmjäger, Gebirgsjäger and Panzer crews trained intensively with it. They learned to read its rhythms, to feel when a barrel needed to be replaced, to trust their assistants. They understood that their success depended on the flawless function of their machine. Those lessons carried over into post-war lives. Veterans often spoke of the pride of mastering a complex weapon under extreme stress. That pride is part of why the MG-34 occupies a special place in military history. Looking back, the MG-34 story is a study in trade-offs. Engineers pursued perfection and produced a masterpiece. Strategists demanded mass production and forced compromise. Soldiers benefited from both. The MG-34 set a standard for reliability and versatility that others followed. The MG-42, built for speed and numbers, saved resources and increased firepower. Together, they shaped how armies think about automatic weapons. The MG-34 reminds us that excellence comes at a price. It asks us to consider when quality outweighs quantity and how those decisions affect lives on the battlefield. This video is intended solely for educational and documentary purposes. It contains no ideology or propaganda.